We are over 1/3 of the way through the season with week 6 behind us, and Baker Mayfield is the quarterback 2, just like we all predicted. This is Stat Chasing.
Pat Fryer Helmo.
This is why I'm hot.
Anita Handjob.
Fix your sight.
Jamar. Alpha play chase.
Are you kidding me? Kadarius Toney?
You can't handle the heat.
It looks like we're finally at this point. You're right.
How you doing, Drico?
Doing good. How about you?
I'm doing well. I know you were telling me this weekend that your advance rates are starting to come up and look pretty good. And
I'm at 20% now. I mean, I don't actually think it holds at 20%. Like, I think I've just been marked safe from Saquon 2 weeks in a row now.
Yeah.
And I have a bunch of teams that are in second place and not many teams that are in third place. So that probably balance itself out. But from feeling like, oh shit, I'm gonna have 12% to being 20, I'm pretty happy with that.
I'd love to know how that feels.
Just surprising relief.
Yeah, in all seriousness, my FFPC stuff that I did the majority of that with you is looking much better now. It's just everywhere else that I'll be poor. So
yeah, I don't understand why the FFPC stuff is like so much better than.
Oh, I understand why the FFPC stuff is so much better.
Oh, please tell me.
Oh, it's because we're drafting with people who the last thought that they had was in 2002. You know, like we're not.
Yeah, you're right. That's kind of like that's the FFPC thesis in action.
Yeah.
Anyway,
people are regularly taking Marvin Harrison over Trey McBride on FFPC, which is, I mean, didn't make sense considering the range of outcomes, and it certainly is not looking good given the specific outcome that we're getting. So,
no, not at all.
But we'll go ahead and get into some charts tonight.
I don't know why the bottom of my screen here is like chamfered, but it's probably the shape. Oh, okay, looking okay now. So here we've got quarterback volume and efficiency and rushing. So we're trying to hit all the major points of quarterback play. We've got efficiency from passing. We've got our rushing upside in the size of the bubble, and then on the horizontal axis, we kind of look at volume. Who's getting the most expected points or fantasy points from passing?
As we look at this chart, I mean, Lamar Jackson immediately stands out to me. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the M in Lamar stands for MVP. This guy is playing incredibly. I just had an idea for the chart. I might have to fiddle around with this one. It might not be an immediate change. But what do you think of, rather than having the size of the bubble indicate rushing yards, if I had like a vector that indicated where they would be in total expected points, just adjusting for the rushing yards? So like Lamar here is averaging, over 100 rushing yards a game or about. And so he's, his total expected points are going to be like close to 24 then. So he's just, if you looked at Lamar's total expected points, he's just off the charts.
Right. The only thing about that, and we can look at different ways. I do worry that it might be a little bit too messy, seeing as how many dots we haven't already.
Yeah, the arrows would get pretty crowded. I think you're right.
I don't want to be right. That sounds really fun, but that would be my concern. So Lamar Jackson, he is at, just break this down. He's at 120.5 expected points, and he's actually scored 151.6 points, which is QB1 on the season so far. But he's actually Jaden Daniels has more expected points at 125.7. Brock Purdy is at 118. Joe Burrow at 115. This is fake news, but Bo Nix at 114. Justin Fields at 113. So I don't know. That actually feels like to me more that some of these quarterbacks are just playing really well. Like Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson playing really well, and that's because of probably their talent and maybe some of their matchups, but I think you're right. I agree that the Lamar is kind of like the QB1, like easily projected rest of the way. But I think we do a good job with this chart. I guess is what I'm saying.
No, yeah, I think, I mean, as far as charts that are telling you how fantasy friendly a quarterback is, I think this one is the most intuitive. And yeah, there must be something off with the rushing calculation there, though, because I just went and checked, and Lamar's averaging just under 70 rushing yards a game. Maybe it's because his bubble is far away from the reference bubble, so I'm just like getting a visual trick. But I mean, I'm gonna check the code on the chart.
Yeah, that's a good call. That's
correct.
A good call.
Because when I was looking at that, I was like, I need to double check that number. But I mean,
it's still gonna be a good visual representation because
they'll all be.
You're looking at you're looking at them relative to each other. But yeah, maybe it's as simple as just changing the 100 yards per game bubble to be bigger. Because I kind of like how it is now. I wouldn't want these guys to be smaller.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. But I don't think we need to say anything more about Lamar. I mean, if you're the thing last year, we were like pounding the table for Lamar like all year because he kept just getting vultured on touchdowns, and his actual fantasy output wasn't really meshing with where he should be producing because he just kept getting vultured on touchdowns. It was really easy to identify that as like smash spot. Just play it, you're going to get there eventually kind of spot. This year, I feel like it's a lot less under the radar, but I also still think like Lamar could have an even larger game. You know, like all you need is for Derrick Henry to not get a touchdown in the game and for it to go to Lamar and for him to have his typical performance otherwise. And like you're accessing a ceiling that it frankly isn't accessible to really very many quarterbacks in this season. It seems like the ceilings for most of these guys are just a lot lower. I mean, even some of the rushing quarterbacks, like I don't want to say that Josh Allen never can hit that ceiling again. It just comes pretty purely from rushing touchdowns. And then I feel like that's Jalen Hurts is kind of in between Lamar and Allen, where he certainly gets access to like his highest ceiling outcomes from getting the rushing touchdowns. But now that he has his pass catching weapons back, we just saw a really good example of it this week with AJ Brown, where he and Devonta Smith, they're both able to get loose and contribute and help out his production there.
Just one thing. So Lamar, his fantasy points over expected per PFF is 5 points per game, but he can certainly deliver a game where he's like 20.
Yeah,
like that can happen.
The quarterback that I thought was really interesting is one of the other best quarterbacks on the chart, Brock Purdy, who put together another very solid performance last Thursday against the Seahawks. This week he gets a much tougher defense. I think we all thought the Seahawks defense was pretty strong, but it certainly hasn't been shaking out that way these last couple weeks. But Purdy plays the Chiefs this week. What do you think about him in this spot?
So Purdy is certainly a regression candidate. I think he's more than a touchdown under expected. Let me confirm that. Yeah, he's okay. So he's 0.7 touchdowns under expected. So he's running cold on touchdowns despite inefficient play with a 10.2 ADOT, a and 8.8 adjusted yards per attempt. The O-line has played really, really well. It's per ESPN, they're fourth in pass block win rate. So all of that is kind of really encouraging. The one kind of caution I have is that the pass blocking grades for the 49ers are they're still good, but they're not like as they're closer to mid-table than like top of the table. For the 49ers, and that kind of suggests that they've been able to dominate by playing kind of weaker pass rushes. And then they get the Chiefs, who is just like you've got Chris Jones there, and it's just like a dominating pass rush. So I guess like it's kind of like a nuance there where I really like Purdy as a GPP play on the season, but I do worry about this specific matchup where like he's had a really high time to throw, so his time to throw has been 3.35 seconds. Like that's higher than Lamar, that's higher than Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels. Like that's actually the highest of any quarterback this season. And because his pass blockers have been able to play so well, if they struggle against the Chiefs, that could be a big problem.
I definitely see the path for the bottom to fall out for the 49ers against a really good Chiefs defense with Purdy's high time to throw. Honestly, what it makes me want to do is I'm really interested in the Chiefs defense, just because the Chiefs run defense is graded 8th overall by PFF. And you've got Mason dealing with the AC joint sprain. So even if he's active, I think they'll be mixing in some of the other backs a little bit more. And I just don't know how much success they can have on the ground, even though the 49ers have a really great run game. I'm just not terribly confident that they can get it done against the Chiefs there. And so if they're having to drop back to pass, there's definitely a lot of volatility there with the high time to throw where
right.
If they're
it's a bad matchup. The 49ers are a great offense. Like they will have very efficient passing days, and you can and there's outcomes where they dominate, but it's a bad matchup.
Yeah. Now, to me, on paper, it does kind of look like the way that you have to beat the Chiefs, though, is through the air. Their rushing defense graded 8th by PFF. Their coverage grade, they're all the way down at 20th, so they're just middle of the pack there. I'm wondering if this could be a spot where the 49ers are forced to take to the air, and maybe if Purdy ends up running even neutral in this spot, you get a really big blow-up game for him. So I think it's interesting. I definitely see the volatility there. Also curious as to
and maybe they game plan for the Chiefs. Maybe they don't have like one of the largest time to throw in the league. Maybe they get it out of his hands quick, and they get it to Debo, they get it to Kittle, they get it to Ayuk. That's certainly a good group of players to rely on yards after the catch.
Yeah, I believe Chiefs defensive position or defense versus position ranking against tight end is they're one of the better matchups in the league, so that definitely makes it interesting for Kittle. I'm curious what you think about the other side of this matchup, though, with Mahomes. I think in the game scripts where Purdy and the 49ers are successful through the air, this might be an interesting spot for Mahomes, but I'm curious what you think there.
Yeah, I'm a little bit jaded on Mahomes, I have to say, just because it's been such rough sledding. He's been like by his metrics, he's been pretty average, and it doesn't seem like the pass catching group is getting any better. You have Travis Kelce there, and then it's Juju Smith-Schuster. I have a tough one with that for sure. And maybe that's a maybe that's a sign that I'm too kind of like low on the Chiefs this year. But the what you call it, the Chiefs defense isn't bad. It's not like some soft matchup.
No. Oh, the 49ers defense, you mean? Yeah, the 49ers, their run
Yeah, that is what I meant. Thank you.
their run defense has left a lot to be desired. Now, they grade pretty poorly in run defense, and they've had some injuries in their defensive front. But, I mean, watching the game against the Seahawks, they look pretty stout against the run to me. I mean, I don't want to base it too much off a one-game sample, but man, the Seahawks really seemed to want to establish it early in the game, and they were just running into the teeth of that 49ers defense, and it was not working. And I don't know if that says more about the Kenneth Walker success rate stuff that we've known about him for his whole career, where, hey, it's just like Kenneth Walker's going to, fizzle out on a bunch of runs, and then he breaks off the occasional really special ones, and that's what makes him who he is. Or if maybe the 49ers run defense on paper is not as bad as it is in real life. What I was really surprised by was
if it is a weak point, though. Sorry, I'm sorry for interrupting. You go ahead.
Their coverage grade is much better, and that was something that they had struggled with last year. So I guess I'm surprised to see them turn it around so starkly.
It's top 5.
Yeah.
It's like their coverage grade is 4th in the league. So that would kind of suggest that the and maybe we're getting too in the weeds in potential game scripts, but that would kind of suggest that the Chiefs will try to run it.
Right. Yeah. So I definitely can see the paths for this one failing. I was curious though on this one for you, but I think
on paper, in a year ago we would have been salivating about this kind of matchup, but some of the pieces on it now seem kind of it does kind of feel like now like one of those classic games where like the Chiefs just turn it into a dogfight. Like they do this a handful of times a year where the Chiefs just turn it into a dogfight and it's like 10-6 or something stupid like that.
Yeah, what you're saying is we could see a heaping helping of Kareem Hunt this game.
Yeah, we could be looking at 25 touches for 70 yards.
Moving on to actually a pair of quarterbacks that both are in a pretty similar spot on the chart and happen to play each other this week. And that's CJ Stroud and Jordan Love. Curious what you think of each of these guys heading into this week, and how do you like this matchup?
So my first reaction when I looked over these guys, when you look at how their team's offenses play, it's a little bit of a Spider-Man meme of needing to be pushed, and so they need to be behind to pick up the volume. And so I do wonder if you could get one of those games where like one of them builds up a lead, gets pushed by the other, and maybe it bounces back and forward. But that does seem like that does seem like a tricky path to get for the volume to get there. They can both get there on efficiency, but I don't think I need to belabor how good and how like efficient they've been. They've both been excellent quarterbacks. They've both been very efficient. But I do. How would you think about something where like they're both kind of neutral, pass rate over expected?
Yeah, well, so in Pat's walkthrough last week, he was talking about how Jordan Love has really been like more along the lines of like middling this season. This was prior to last week, and it kind of surprised me. I know we only had a couple games for him because he got hurt, but looking at what Pat went over, it's like, okay, like that makes sense. He really, I think in our heads, we were thinking of him better than he actually had been. Then he goes out and puts up a really solid performance against the Cardinals here. Gets a pretty good matchup against a relatively weak Houston pass defense. I mean, Drake May just went out and, it was in garbage time, but he put up 250 yards and 3 touchdowns on him. Had himself a pretty good day. So
it's interesting that Pat said he was kind of like average, because I do distinctly remember us saying that he's been good. He's been efficient. Yeah.
I'll have to go back through the walkthrough and cite some of that stuff. But anyway, he certainly showed that he's definitely more along the lines of good than average after this last week. I think part of that was just the small sample of only having a couple games to go off of there.
Right.
But I think here the way that we get this game to get pushed is probably through an explosive. Now, I don't know that the Texans really are the one that could provide the explosive because they're missing Nico Collins, who is like their big explosive play manufacturer, right? I mean, maybe you get another one of these breakaway runs by Joe Mixon. I'm certainly not going to count on that. But I think the Packers are actually my favorite spot to kind of get this game going in the fun direction by generating an explosive. And that comes from Love's deep passing. It also comes from them having Christian Watson back, which I think is pretty interesting and adds another element to this pass game. So I think if you're playing this game to be a shootout, you probably want to do it through with a Packers weapon that's you're saying is going to be delivering the explosive play to kick this game off.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I do you, so then I maybe there's time for this later, but then do you think like Tank Dell kind of last year was that explosive play deliverer? Is that just not on the cards?
No, I definitely it's for sure in the range of outcomes. And he did. Do you have Tank Dell's ADOT for this last week, Andy?
Give me 1 second.
Okay. I want to say, from what I remember, I want to say that it was a little bit higher. But I'll see if I can pull them up here.
So Tank Dell ADA, it was 8.1.
Yeah, it looks like it was actually the lowest or second lowest that it's been on the season. 8.1 this last week. Week one, its highest ADOT of 16.6. So, I mean, I don't want to zoom in too much on the chart here and say, oh, Tank Dell won't get any more deep targets. But yeah, definitely interesting to watch here. I mean, it's certainly in his bag to deliver an explosive play. So, yeah, probably being a little too restrictive to say it has to come from the Packers. I just think they're probably a better bet for it than it coming from the Texans. But
right.
The next quarterback that I wanted to point out here. Now, this one is, we didn't get any new information about this player because he was on a bye. But I'm pretty interested in the spot. So we get Sam Darnold, who is in a pretty favorable part of the chart. He's in that top right quadrant that we like to have our quarterbacks be in. He's coming off bye. He's got, a healthy Justin Jefferson, a healthy Jordan Addison. TJ Hawkinson not going to be active this game, but starting to work his way back. You've got potentially a slightly banged up Aaron Jones. He practiced on Monday, reportedly. But, they just traded for Cam Akers, so if we're reading the tea leaves, like maybe he's not 100%. So I wonder here, with the Lions no longer having Aiden Hutchinson to provide that really strong pass rush, I mean, he was doing so much work for them in that.
I was looking, if you look up the pass rush grades for the various Detroit Lions defensive linemen, he was like he is a crushing loss for them. So they have two good defensive tackles, but then outside of Aiden Hutchinson, it's really weak. They actually have kind of like a rotation on the other side at defensive end, and like those guys were not playing particularly well. So already having to like get the other side of the defensive end by kind of volume, switching up different players, and now having to do that with both. Like I do have, like, it's defensive. Like I guess we're not experts, but that has the feeling of something where that could be a pretty dramatic drop off for the Lions.
Yeah, that was why I was so interested in this, because if you get increased time to throw here and the Vikings are able to attack more downfield, I mean, that's that's pretty good for Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. Both of those guys are very very proficient at
Right,
deep.
right.
So,
But I guess I was trying to like buttress your point where it's like it's obviously Hutchinson is a superstar, but they also have this problem where they actually pretty light on depth too. Like they didn't have the depth to fill in there.
right. And so do you think that's a bigger blow to the Lions in run defense or in pass rushing, losing Hutchinson?
Probably pass rush. Like their defensive tackles are still good, and I mean you still have outside runs and stuff like that, so they could be vulnerable on that. But I do think having a defensive tackles there does help a lot on the run stuff.
So of the game environments that we went through here, and I guess we weren't so fair to Jared Goff. We didn't really touch on him. He's in a pretty great spot on the chart. They absolutely just eviscerated the Cowboys. So he got some nice stat padding in there. But the Vikings defense is pretty formidable. They blitz an awful lot. I just wonder, how much of a ceiling Goff really has in this game. But for these three games that we kind of highlighted here, the 49ers Chiefs or the Texans and Packers or Lions and Vikings, which of these three game environments do you like the best? And is there
I think it's Lions Vikings.
And so I would assume that you prefer Darnold then out of Darnold and Goff.
Yeah, in a vacuum and all that kind of stuff, for sure, Darnold. I do wonder though if like the Lions might be like the exception to the offenses that could get stifled by the Vikings D, where I don't really know how for example like the pick six that we saw in London, where the Vikings basically they knew what play was coming because the Jets had sort of tipped, not that they tipped it, but they were so predictable in calling it, where you have like so many. Well, I guess what I'm saying is you have so many potent offensive weapons on the Lions, and then like a very strong offensive play caller. So like that could be a combination where even though the Vikings defense is good, if they're pushing the Lions and so the Lions are having to throw a ton, you could see a Lions offense like push back the tide, I think, against the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean. The Cowboys defense is a total cupcake defense, but the Lions just dropped a 40 burger on them, and they're
using their linemen as receivers.
Yeah, cooking Cowboys defenders with offensive linemen. So I could see this game shooting out. It's a really interesting one for me. The thing that I like about the Lions is they have ways to punish that Vikings blitz heavy approach. Like, if you want to blitz us, all right, I guess we're doing JMO slants.
Right.
Let's see.
Yeah. It's like, good luck catching this guy.
Yeah, all right. It's a JMO shallow crosser. Let's see if we can get him the ball
right
behind the blitzing linebacker. Oh, we did. All right. So
you're gonna try and what you call it, jam up Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, good luck. He's probably gonna be open.
So it shapes up to be a pretty fun one, in my opinion. I'm glad I was going back and forth between the Texans and Packers one, but getting your insight, I think I agree with you that I do like the Vikings Lions the best here. You also get it in a dome.
Oh, that's always nice, right?
Yes. Okay, the last note I had for the quarterback chart before we move on to running backs. I wanted to get your favorite from the bottom right quadrant of the chart. So these are like our guys that are potentially primed for regression. They're getting a lot of expected fantasy points, so the volume's there. The efficiency just hasn't been there. So who do you prefer for a get right spot this week? And so there's a couple guys that I think are interesting. I'll just list them off, and then you let me know who your favorite is. So we've got Andy Dalton versus a really weak Washington defense. We've got Geno Smith versus Atlanta coming off of a 52 pass attempt game for Geno. And then you've got Matt Stafford off the bye against an absolutely putrid Raiders defense, potentially getting Cooper Kupp back. So which of those are your favorite?
Yeah, those are all like honestly, those are all high volume passing attacks where like they have been high volume against bad defenses. So if I'm thinking about this the right way, I think that if things are going right for the offense, for example, the Panthers, I think I could see them actually kind of running the ball quite a bit. I think if things are going right for the Rams, also could see that being a run-heavy game. The Seahawks are the one where I think like even if things go right, they're still gonna pass a good amount. Cause like they've got the really high it's not really high. They've got the +6 pass rate over expected. So like that's what feels right. On the other hand, I'd made a couple of notes about Stafford where his the big issue with his efficiency is kind of like aggregate composite efficiency has been going way under on touchdowns. So having somebody like Kupp back could be a big deal for him, kind of like having some positive regression on the touchdowns. And then I guess the issue I have with Dalton is we kind of know who he is. Like, I think he's like a competent backup, but he's not somebody who I'm ever gonna like just expect to be on the higher end of efficiency in the league. Not that he can't, but I just wouldn't expect it.
Yeah, that's fair. Certainly non-derogatory. That's fair. Yeah, I think the Panthers, the key to the Panthers is just play it through their hyper consolidated weapons. It's not attacking on Dalton. It's just playing it through Chuba and Deontay and calling it a day and knowing you're getting the vast majority of the fantasy points from that offense just through those two players.
Yeah, Chuba could be like because he's pretty much a bell cow now.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty strong. Not to give anything too much away, but that's a pretty strong play.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to get into narrative as well, I mean, you've got a guy like Chuba who, coming out of college, I think we all like Chuba as a prospect. Then he kind of had started his career with a bit of a whimper, and then now he's seeing this young buck in Jonathon Brooks, just becoming activated, like here to potentially take his job. Like this might be the Chuba Hubbard. I gotta make a case to retain my job type game. So maybe might be reading a little too much into it. I mean, these guys are always going to be hyper competitive, trying their hardest, but maybe
actually
a little.
Speaking of Chuba, I think that's a pretty good transition to the running back chart. Excellent
transition. That was flawless.
Other than interrupting you, pretty flawless. So I thought this was interesting. So Chuba Hubbard, he has 5 point. Let me make sure I'm getting this right. Chuba has 5.8 yards per carry this season, with like pretty strong usage. So it's not like he's just getting draw plays on third down or like some plays that with expected high yardage. Like he's playing really, really well. And a side note, Zach, you probably missed this, but there was a small discussion on Twitter kind of burying the rush yards over expected model on that Next Gen Stats put together. And some of those issues is like, so Leone kind of said it's less sticky year to year for players than just straight unadjusted yards per attempt. And then the other piece of it is that it actually incorporates how fast the player is into their expected when they get the ball. If you're a fast player, you're going to have a higher expected rush yard than a slow player. So the rush yards over expected is it's not as good for kind of like determining. This is the next gen stats. It's probably not as good for determining player quality as we might have thought.
Yeah, that's some good insight. And yeah, not being on Twitter, I did miss that conversation. The incorporating player speed into it seems a little silly. I think it probably would be a lot more useful if they just use like a replacement level speed for it, and then you could
Right.
measure what the player was doing above expectation. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, I mean, Chuba's role, like if you look at it here, it's pretty darn good. It's right there between Brees Hall and Saquon Barkley. So yeah, absolute bell cow role. He's getting tons of work in the passing game too. Like he's game script proof. I mean, you just for weekly formats of fantasy, you just keep riding Chuba until the wheels fall off, until Jonathan Brooks comes in and turns it into a timeshare. But
And the thing I think about this though is like Brooks is going to have to take work off of Chuba. It's not just going to be handed to him. Like he's going to have to play better, decidedly better than Chuba to turn it into a real timeshare. Like
yeah,
Chuba is playing really well. If Chuba keeps playing like this, they're going to have a tough time like giving him like and that's disappointing to me too. But I think it's something to recognize, and like he's playing so well, it's going to be tough to usurp him.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's a big part of it where the team did spend so much draft capital on Jonathan Brooks. And like, I think it's just one of those like, they just bought the Ferrari, like they want to take it for a spin type situation. So I don't think he's going to have trouble getting on the field. I do think he's going to have trouble like earning more work than Chuba. I think.
Yeah,
Uh, I don't want to like get out over my skis on
they're going
this.
to play him. I'm
Do you,
not saying they're not going to play him.
do you think he's a dog to out touch Chuba in week 17?
No, I don't think he is. I think he's probably a favorite there, but it's going that favoritism like incorporates him playing really well as he ramps back up from injury. Like if he doesn't, then there's no way he can be.
Right, right. Another guy who just has assumed a complete workhorse role, just absolute bell cow, is Kenneth Walker. In the show note, I put "This ain't your mama's Kenneth Walker" because he's not the Kenneth Walker that you remembered from previous seasons, where he wasn't really involved in the pass game. He'd get a couple, he'd get a good amount of carries, but not everything. That's dead and buried. This is new Kenneth Walker, super soldier. I mean, this guy is getting everything. He's super involved in the passing game. I think on our last show, we talked about, I made a comment about how does Kenneth Walker have so many expected receiving fantasy points? And you look back and showed, oh, well, he had all these targets in this game when they were coming from behind. Yeah, turns out same thing. We got the same thing against the 49ers. Kenneth Walker gets a ton of targets again. I mean, yeah, the role for Kenneth Walker is elite. He's definitely, I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say he's a top 5 fantasy back rest of the season.
Yeah, for sure. Like he learned. This is Kenneth Walker who learned how to goal line carry. He's actually positive efficiency on touchdowns. So like, he's getting the goal line role. He's converting it to touchdowns, and he's catching targets. Like he's like you said, he's heavily involved in down game script, and when they score points, he's heavily involved in getting those points. Like he might be the best shot at a legendary season this year.
I was just thinking that when we get to the efficiency charts, I do want to do a legendary season check-in with you again because I think that's fun to do periodically. But before we get there are a couple other running backs on this chart whose outlooks are decidedly less rosy than Kenneth Walker's. And both of these guys, I would say, previously had bell cow roles, and now both of those are looking like they're in jeopardy. And that's Rachaad White and Devin Singletary. So for White, we see his role in jeopardy due to I mean, both of them are due to injury. They open up the door to these younger. I mean, in White's
do you remember? I remember when the reason that Rachaad White wasn't getting a lot of rushing yards was because the O-line was bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I don't think the O-line is bad.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the rush yards over expected model was correct when it comes to Rachaad White. So, yeah, I mean,
but if you look at ESPN, Tampa Bay actually has one of the best run blocking O-lines. They're mid-table by PFF. So I know just before he went out, Rachaad White had like the big long run, but I think he's crushed a little bit. Even if he does maintain like a role, like it's whatever he has right now is very tenuous, very tenuous. He cannot continue to play mediocre and hold on to what he has. Like even diminished what he has, I think he's in trouble.
Yeah, the problem for Rachaad White is that his role, the amount of role that he retains is inversely proportional to how intelligent the Bucs coaching staff is. So the worse they are, the better role Rachaad White will have. And so I think it really comes down to like how big of donkeys do you think are making the decisions for what running backs are getting touches.
So just to kind of note here, in the last game with White out, it was actually Bucky Irving who was the passing down back. They actually trusted Bucky Irving. Now let me look this up, so I get it exactly right. But they actually trusted him to be the passing down back. So he had 5 pass blocking snaps in the last game. He also, I think he had 27 routes. So to me, like maybe he is slightly better as a pass blocker to Bucky, but him having this kind of moat as being the pass blocker, as being the guy who can catch targets, that feels really tough. It feels really tough. I guess it's for Bucky. I guess one note for Bucky, it is kind of a little bit of concern that even when you got his contingent upside role, it was still pretty heavily capped by them splitting the carries. They split the carries 50-50 with Sean Tucker. But at the same time, like the Rachaad White stuff feels really bad.
Yeah, Tucker did get a lot fewer snaps than Bucky did, and a lot of those Tucker carries did come. Now, this was a crazy game, but a lot of the Tucker carries came later in the game. After, now I don't want to say it was out of hand just because this game was so swingy that like I don't think it ever was really out of hand until it was like the Bucs had a 3-score lead on it, but. Man, so a lot of the Sean Tucker stuff came later, but that's not to say it was all garbage time, because it certainly wasn't. But it was more that when Tucker was on the field, he was getting touches at a high rate.
It was to give him a carry.
Yeah, just to give him a carry. Nick had a good question in the chat. Do you guys think Sean Tucker is an ad? I absolutely think he's an ad. I had so much Sean Tucker in the big board last year. I really, really loved him as a prospect. Super fun guy. His highlights are really fun.
Where that's most relevant probably is in FFPC kind of redraft leagues. And I think he will be a target for most people in waivers. I know Steph is kind of like the expert on waiver sizing. My thoughts would be that he's more like a stash, where once White comes back, and it sounds like he will come back soon. Once White comes back, he probably won't play that much, but then once you get that injury, you kind of know what you get there. You get what seems like a very efficient runner who will get lots of carries in high play count games. So to me, that feels like encouragement not to kind of go overboard. Like he's not like some super priority fab where you have to like load up all your fab on him, but he is somebody who's a stash that where you have that upside of like they can say like see a White and or White gets injured or blah blah blah, but you probably, unless you're really really stuck, you can't really start Tucker while White is healthy.
I agree 100% with you. He's someone that you really want to have on your bench for when the contingent upside comes in. And it doesn't necessarily require an injury. It could just be that the staff realizes, they do a three-way time split and then slowly realize like, okay, we can't justify giving Rachaad White carries. He's now just a really good depth piece for us. I just don't think that, I think that'll take a little while to happen. And so you're gonna sit with Sean Tucker for a while, but he's someone that I'm happy to have on my bench. I want to ask you a quick question. If you were going to be adding or dropping someone, Sean Tucker or Emmanuel Wilson, who would you rather have on your bench in an FFPC league?
I think you'd rather have Tucker.
Really?
Because,
okay.
Well, yeah, we've almost seen the Emmanuel Wilson like upside. I guess maybe if you get an injury to Josh Jacobs,
right?
You're much cleaner on Emmanuel Wilson. But
so you just think the probability of Tucker usurping White without an injury is high enough that, because I think the ceiling for Wilson is higher in the case of an injury, because then I think it's probably just him, and then maybe you get a little Marshawn Lloyd mixed in if he's back. But I think you just have a problem in Tampa Bay where you now have two backs that seem good, and you've got one that's just kind of more entrenched, and so it's just a little more crowded there. I don't know. I thought it was an interesting spot.
It is interesting, and I could be wrong here, but some of what I was kind of baking in there on Wilson is that even if you get like that now that I think about it, even if you get an injury on Emmanuel Wilson, then they probably bring in somebody. It's probably not just Emmanuel Wilson.
You're very right. This is like classic fantasy football player brain, where you're like, oh yeah, the backup running back will clearly assume the entire role or most of it. It's like, no, like it's a learn a name spot, right?
Yeah, learn a name spot is a good way to put it. And I mean, his role would improve. His role right now isn't actually bad. Like he's got a better standalone, but it's kind of like he hasn't really he's gotten extended play without really making an impact, which I think you have to factor that in too. Where like if somebody's playing a lot and they're not like making an impact, then how can they be a difference maker for you? Like maybe I'm overreacting to Sean Tucker being like very good, but are like scoring lots of points last week. But I also do kind of want to react to that. Like I do like to factor that in.
I think you're right. It's a prospect we were excited for, who had an understandable reason why he hasn't produced yet or gotten an opportunity. His very first opportunity, guy looks pretty good. So I think it's the kind of thing where you need to be aggressive to get out ahead of it if you want to be the one to capture that upside. So definitely a good stash. Let's move on to the next guy whose previous bell cow role is now in jeopardy in Devin Singletary. I mean, the Tyrone Tracy genie does not go back in the bottle after the games that we've seen from him. Man, he looks good. I really like Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah, he's played pretty phenomenal. I don't think you go back to bell cow Singletary. I don't think we get that again. But Singletary is also the type of back who will like stubbornly hold on to a role because he does all the little things right.
Yeah,
like, Singletary is not going to lose a job. He's just not.
I believe that it was you who likened Devin Singletary to creeping ivy, where he will just slowly strangle out the other backs in the backfield. I think Tracy is probably too good to get strangled out, but I think Singletary is just too consistent. As a real-life NFL player, Devin Singletary is really freaking good. Like, he's not the most exciting guy, but Devin Singletary is that...
Nobody gets fired for playing Devin Singletary.
No, he's the reliable vehicle. Devin Singletary's got 300,000 miles on him, and he's never broken down. You know that he's going to get you from point A to point B.
It is, I mean, it is kind of like indicative though that you saw after it being a much closer split in week 5 for Tracy and Eric Gray, it became a Tyrone Tracy is the guy split. And then with that role, he played just as well, if not better. So you do have that like piece where Tracy is playing really, really well in a way that the coaching staff is very clearly recognizing. And so that feels like a new development, and the coaching staff will have to react to it, where it will be much closer to 50-50 than before. It probably, who knows how close to 50-50 it is, but much closer than it was before.
Yeah. Moving on to the next guy, we talked about this player a little bit already, and in the context of the matchup, but Aaron Jones coming off the bye week, with the potential injury, spotted in practice on Monday. I definitely want to watch the situation closely, but how do you feel about him against this Lions defense without Hutchinson?
So, I mean, like I said, I think the pass defense is more impacted than the run defense. I do think that it's a spot where the Vikings will look to pass, because like they are actually kind of like a pass heavy team as well. If you get healthy Aaron Jones, like, that's always going to be interesting. He's a really explosive player. Like, he doesn't have to get there on the ground. He could also catch a bunch of passes and house one. And if you're trying to win a GPP, like, it's that kind of play that you need. I think it's interesting, like, but definitely really concerned by him coming back off the injury.
Okay. The next guy I wanted to touch on here, relatively new addition to the chart because he dealt with an injury through much of the early season here. That's Raheem Mostert. And the split now, things are so weird with the Dolphins without them having Tua, and then you get the A-chain concussion. So, definitely a little weird. They're coming off the bye here. So Etienne's 2 weeks removed now. This will be his second week, from the concussion. He should be fine to play. But what do you think of either of these Dolphins running backs here? They get a pretty good matchup against the Colts. Do you have any interest in either of them, and do you have a lean one way or the other?
So, with Achane back, it has to be Achane over Mostert. Like, I think it just has to be. Like, he's the lead for them now. And it's honestly, he had such command of that backfield that, and Mostert had seemed like a player so clearly kind of aged out that it's hard for me to do the Mostert thing. Do you feel differently?
I mean, I know that it was off the injury, but Mostert got 20 touches in their last game, and it's not like Achane has been particularly efficient this season. I think I agree with you that Achane is the one now, and that's what they want. But I also think during the bye they might have, had a little bit of a come to Jesus moment on it and said, maybe we shouldn't be giving Achane, 20 plus touches a game. Maybe we go back to the thing that keeps him fresh and explosive. Like, riddle me this. Would you rather give Achane 20 touches a game and then he's not efficient, and so you're just not getting these big explosive plays, or do you want to give him 10 to 12 touches a game? And the reason that he's getting fewer touches is because the drive's end, because he's getting a 60, 80-yard touchdown run, So
Right. That makes sense. I honestly, especially coming off a bye, it does look like Jalen Wright played much better than Mostert. Just by the numbers, it looks like he's played better. Like, if you're going to have like a bye week shakeup, like I'd almost wonder if it's Jalen Wright over Mostert.
Okay. Well, now you've gotten me back to Chan. Previously, I was a little interested in Mostert here, just to see if he assumes the role that they had him in last year. I certainly think that wanes as the season goes on because, like you said, he's an older player. Like, the injury really hampered him to start the season. He missed a lot of time. I'm just wondering if it's like these are the freshest. We'll get Raheem Mostert's legs, and so we make the most out of them here. But the smart play is probably just a Chan, and you just go back to the guy who's shown that he can be good for multiple long house calls a week. So
yeah, I that's how I feel about it. Where like I really think that there's not a small risk that they actually go with Wright, just because when somebody starts hitting that cliff, like it appears that Mostert is, like that fall off can be dramatic.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We've got a couple good questions in the chat. This one, Corum, Vidal, Tucker, or Bigsby, rest of season. I mean, I guess I'll go ahead and rank them, and you let me know if you disagree on any of them here. For me, it's Vidal number 1, probably Corum number 2, Tucker number 3, and Bigsby number 4. I don't think Bigsby is a thing. I think Bigsby is wish casting because he had a couple good breakaway runs. Etienne was dealing with the injury, so Bigsby got more playing time. And Bigsby is not at all involved in the passing game. Like, they're using Dearness Johnson over him. And I don't know if I want to believe that the player that we saw stink out loud all last year all of a sudden is having a renaissance. I think I want to rely a little bit more on my priors there and not get over my skis on Bigsby. So
yeah, the player who actually led the team in snaps at running back was Dearness Johnson. So if you were you were trying to like consider this, like, hey, Travis Etienne is injured or maybe he's not as good anymore, they're phasing him out, you have this ascending player in Bigsby. What you don't want to see is Dearness Johnson with like a 54% snap rate. Like,
Yeah, I mean, the other three just kind of feel like these are all really good bench stash players, right? Like, all of these are really, I'm happy. If I'm looking at a team and I see that guy on the roster, I'm like, cool, that's good.
Yeah.
So that's kind
they can all get there. They all have different flavors and can get there in different ways, but they're all strong.
Yep. And then Run Good Rick also had a pretty good question. I want to save that one for the efficiency charts, though. So I didn't want you to think we were not seeing you, Run Good Rick, but we'll get to that Bijan question. On the efficiency charts, only had one more for this starters chart here, and that's Javonte Williams. So, okay, Gretsch had a really interesting point about Javonte in, I think it was his Stealing Signals last week. But it's that Javonte's snap share, if you look at it from a percentage, you'll see it, waver up and down week over week. It's not terribly consistent. But if you look at it from a raw snaps perspective, the number of raw snaps and opportunities that Javonte gets are very consistent. So it's almost like Sean Payton has like, hey, this is about how many snaps I want to give to any one guy in a week because he's trying to manage workload, and that makes sense. If you really did think that mattered for the quality of your players over the course of a season, like not getting that, just like you're looking at a pitch count for a pitcher, like you're not looking at percent of pitches thrown in a game, like you're looking at the actual pitch count, right? So that makes sense for the Javonte workload. The thing that I'm concerned about is the production coming on that workload. I mean, I think it's pretty fair to attribute a lot of that to just the Broncos struggling. Lately, they've been a little bit better. Knicks has certainly been better, but it's just not translating for Javonte. So I'm kind of wondering, with Estimate coming back and immediately getting – Estimate got snaps in his first game off IR, as a rookie that missed a bunch of time. Do you think that Thursday night here against the Saints is Javonte's last gasp to kind of hold off Audric Estime?
That's hard to say, isn't it? Just because we've seen Javonte not play as well as we hoped for or expected, and then still hold on to a role. And then, so Estimate, he had two rush attempts.
Yeah,
I'm
only
not
two
actually
attempts.
sure. I'm not sure how many snaps he had. I'm gonna look that up real quick. But I can't imagine that it was too many.
No, I don't believe it was terribly substantial.
Okay, he had 2 snaps.
Yeah, 2 snaps, 2 carries. So
He did have 6 snaps in kick return.
there you go. Yeah, I mean,
So I guess that makes it really hard to kind of call for the end of Javonte's time in Denver.
I mean, I think Javonte just maybe ran a little hot with the Tyler Bidet injury too. Like that might have been that was the first person coming at Javonte for the role, and now we get another. It's just like how many can he survive? I don't know. I'm relatively concerned about Javonte. I think Thursday is pretty important for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he can get right where he can play bad, and they're still like, yes, this is our guy. So I think that's very reasonable. The part where I hesitate is like calling the point where it's like, yes, this is the one
Right,
who has
right.
to do it.
Yeah, we don't want to.
But I agree with the sentiment of like he can't play bad. He can't keep getting away with this.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to the backups chart. There's really only one guy that I wanted to touch on here, other than Kyle Juszczyk's hilarious snap share. When the 49ers deal with running back injuries, Kyle Juszczyk comes a knocking. But no, the one I really wanted to point out here, we've got the Chase Brown ascension continuing. I believe now, again, these charts, the running back charts, are rolling. The usage one is rolling 4 weeks. So we're looking at the last 4 weeks of data so that we can pick up on emergent trends. So this Chase Brown stuff, we've got 4 weeks of data, but here over this most recent week, he did finally flip Zack Moss in snaps. Is that right?
He flipped him in snaps. Now, some of that is because the Bengals actually didn't pass block that much. There was only 3 total pass blocking snaps. And so that's a big part of it. But another part of it was that Chase Brown got more he had more rushes, 10 rush attempts for Brown versus 6 for Moss. And he also had more routes, 19 versus 14. I do wonder if those routes would look different in games with lots of pass blocking. There is part of me that wonders if that was kind of a game plan specific thing, and then if they use a back to pass block more, the passing stuff tilts more in favor of Zack Moss again. But this is definitely a very, very encouraging development for Chase Brown drafters. I think you're still, you're still at a 6. So you're at a 60% snap rate for Chase Brown, and then a 44% snap rate for Zack Moss. Obviously, that doesn't add up to 90. That doesn't add up to 100%. That adds up to 104%. So there must have been snaps where they were both on the field. But pretty encouraging.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's Chase Brown was a buy. He is a buy. That's a win.
And the other piece is like he always looks so much better when he gets the ball.
It's super stark, man. Watching,
it shows up in the numbers too.
Yeah, it checks all the boxes, right? Like it's what I'm seeing when I look at the stats. It's what I'm seeing when I look at the advanced metrics. It's what I'm seeing when I watch the game. So it's like when all of those things align, it just gives you more confidence in the evaluation of the player that this guy is good. So definitely exciting. Let's move on to the efficiency charts.
Anybody you think of as interesting here on efficiency?
Yeah, so for me the thing that stood out the most on the efficiency charts was really just that we have these clear tiers beginning to form, and it's so nice when this happens. And I remember feeling this way last season as well, when it's like, oh yeah, like when we finally start getting these guys more settled into their roles and their workload, and like we start knowing what they are, and we just see these clear tiers forming. It makes it just feels so much more orderly to me, and so here we don't really have anyone that is sitting well positioned for a legendary season. I mean, you've got guys like Jonathan Taylor, Kyren Williams, kind of on the threshold. Derrick Henry is trying his damnedest. I mean, if he has a legendary season, he's going to get there purely through efficiency. It's not going to be from the passing game. He's not getting his requisite 4 targets per game to qualify for the legendary season screener. But damn it, he's going to put up 2,100 rushing yards and 20 touchdowns. So, man, Derrick Henry's so fun. I wish I had drafted more of him. I don't hate that I faded him. I think it wasn't a terrible process.
Yeah, I don't regret it. I wish I was able to root for him more financially, yes. But I don't consider it a bad decision.
Even though he is hurting me every week financially, I still root for him. I fucking love Derrick Henry, man. He's one of my favorite players. I mean, if you're in Discord, you've seen my avatar. It's the Derrick Henry face. The guy he's the best. I love Derrick Henry. Wish he was helping me more financially. But I mean, the whole thesis for the fade was, I mean, the only way he buries me is if he gets 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. And Derrick Henry just said, "Hold my beer." Like, that's light work. So, yeah, he's a fun one. Okay, this one is interesting though.
Just because I looked this up, Chase Brown 5.5 yards per carry this season. Zack Moss 3.6. One of them is way better.
Yeah, pretty clearly. Okay, this one's interesting though. So you get this tier of guys who I don't think anyone, based on the Hubbard workload and his efficiency, he's over 5 a carry. Like, I don't think anyone's surprised to see him where he is on the chart. Same with Henry, Kyren Williams, Jonathan Taylor, hoping that Taylor comes back from that ankle injury soon. But Joe Mixon is here. And to me, this kind of feels like one of those, one of these things that's not like the others spots. But I want to hear your take on this Joe Mixon spot on the efficiency chart. Are you buying or selling this? Does he belong in this band of 15 to 20 expected fantasy points a game?
So in terms of expected points, yeah. I mean, I think he was drafted to live in this role where they would use him a lot, and I think this kind of usage is a pretty easy projection going forward. I'm not sure if I buy the efficiency, like and it's hard to sell the efficiency when he's actually like been so efficient, but at the same time he is an older running back, and he's already gotten an injury. I think there was people kind of commenting that he looked like he was running injured in this game. So I'm hearing like a fuzzy, like, are you hearing that?
I am not. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. So I think in games where he plays healthy, it actually feels like he's somebody who's young enough that he's going to deliver good games. But I guess there's that risk there that he got injured. And I think that's probably the right way to think about Mixon, where his usage is good. He's good enough that while healthy, his efficiency will be okay, but you probably have elevated injury risk there.
Yeah, we also just have a really small sample of him being a Texan because he got it. He's only had a couple games now. I'm interested in this spot against the Packers. They don't have a fantastic rush defense. So I think it's interesting. He did only have 12 carries this last week. It's probably because it was his first game off the injury and they were just beating the brakes off the Patriots. So no need to, put a bunch of wear on him. So I think they want to use him a lot. If you want to play the Texans and Packers game to fail, he seems like a great way to do it. Texans, move the ball efficiently on offense, and then Joe Mixon gobbles up all the points. That seems like an interesting angle to that game to me. But yeah, I'm glad I got your insight on if you're buying or selling him. Seems like you kind of land in hold territory.
Yeah. I mean, like I went into the season as a sell Mixon guy because of the age risk, and I think you've gotten like some of the good and the bad there, where like he's looked better than maybe I'd expected, but then injuries come with being old too, as I well know.
Okay, couple more guys I wanted to touch on quickly on this chart before you go to the next one. So we get Saquon Barkley, and he's living in that 10 to 15 expected fantasy point band with guys like James Cook, Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs. Drico, I was told Saquon Barkley was going to score 30 fantasy points every game. What gives?
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised here as well. So this expected points. So it looks like he's coming in. Where I'm showing him coming in at 17.9 expected points a game. That's it. If you include week 1, he's got 17.9 expected points a game. That's the disconnect there. Whereas in the last 4 weeks, it's trended closer to 14. And so with that, he's kind of ticked down to a 73% snap rate. And so he's actually they've used Kenneth Gainwell as the pass blocker more often, so he's kind of siphoned off some of those routes. And then it also seems like they've kind of started to establish the brotherly shove a little bit more, so that rushing expected points has come down too. The answer is probably somewhere in the middle. He's probably like something like a 15 expected points per game guy, which that seems pretty that actually seems pretty in keeping with what we would have expected before the season. And then how he's kind of salvaged it this year, so far anyway, has been breaking off the long runs. And I don't know, that O-line is really good, so maybe we should expect it to happen some of the time. But I'm feeling pretty marked safe from Saquon right now.
Yeah, I want to look up the Jordan Mailata injury. So it looks like Jordan Mailata's hamstring injury is going to cause him to miss time. I think he was getting an MRI today, so it's going to be a couple weeks. That's definitely a big loss for the Eagles. I think that
he's an offensive lineman for them, is he?
Yeah, I think that impacts Saquon's upside a little bit there, because you want those big holes open so that you can break off the explosive runs. That being said, like were playing against the Browns. The Browns have a pretty good defense. He still looked fine, and the parts of that game that I caught, he didn't look bad to me by any. I'm the resident Saquon hater here. Like he didn't look bad. So it's not if you have Saquon bags, you don't need to panic on him. I just think that what you saw to start the season is like, don't expect that every single week. And then what you've got,
that's the high end of his range.
Yeah, and what you got these last couple weeks, this week and then the one prior to the bye, that's probably a little on the low side for him. So reality probably lies somewhere in between there. I do think, though, this revenge game that he gets against the Giants is a pretty interesting spot. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Eagles try to get him,
some touchdowns,
a couple touchdowns here. So
yeah.
it's a fun spot here for sure.
It's an interesting revenge game narrative. Yeah, I will say, so in week 5, Saquon, he had just 37.6 expected rushing yards. But his expected points piece kind of saved that with one expected touchdown. That's not week 5, that's week 4.
Yeah, I was gonna say week 5 he had 0 expected yards. He was on the line.
But then so week 6, just 80 expected rushing yards, 0 expected touchdowns, or 0.05. And so it is surprising to me that those games are actually in his range. I think what you're kind of getting at is you're going to get to an average of 15 expected points per game through some highs and lows. That we overreacted too much to the upside of what happens. We shouldn't overreact to the bottom falling out in a couple of weeks as well.
Right. Let's see. The other one that I wanted to point out, he's right next to Saquon on the chart, but he's got some tailwinds here to help him out for this next week, because I believe Tyjae Spears is injured. Let me pull up and see if there's any new Tyjae Spears injury news here.
But he left the game with a hamstring injury, and if I remember, he was kind of ruled out relatively quickly.
Yeah, it looks like the most recent thing is that he's week to week, so I would assume that he is missing this week. So then you get Pollard here, has a pretty good matchup against the Bills. I'm definitely interested in him in this spot. What do you think about Pollard here, and how does his role change with Spears out?
So I think we actually got a pretty good view as to how his role would be, with Spears out, in that he got pretty much all the work in week 6. They involved Julius Chestnut a little bit, but honestly very, very little, only to spell Pollard. I think that it's kind of like you kind of need that offense to go room for him to work. Because if you look, even with all that work, he only had 12.3 expected points last week, and even despite consolidating almost everything. So, I think that's a good GPP play where it's Tony Pollard. They're gonna use him a lot, so you have upside there, but you do have to be mindful of the systemic risk with the offense, because that stuff seems really bad right now, right?
Yeah, certainly, and yeah, I think that's the only cold water on Pollard this week. Good matchup, good role. The offense just stinks out loud. So, and honestly, I was watching the game because I had some stuff going in their game last week, and the only his touchdown was such a fluke play. It was like a draw play on 3rd and 19 or something stupid. I don't think it was maybe it's 3rd and 13 or something. It was just it wasn't even sometimes you see teams call these draw plays when it's third and forever because they're just trying to like get a little field position and then they'll kick a field goal or punt or whatever. They were like well within field goal range, like getting a few yards closer to me didn't seem worth like just basically doing the wave the white flag on third down, like throw a pass. I mean, I guess you have Will Levis, your quarterback, so maybe throwing the pass is waving the white flag. But Pollard just breaks a couple terrible arm tackles and then rumbles into the end zone on what most teams would consider like a give up play. So it was a little fluky to me. So I think the cold water is probably warranted here, where maybe you don't want to get out over your skis too much on Pollard. But he does seem to be in a pretty good spot this week.
Yeah. I agree for sure.
Okay, the other notes I had for the efficiency charts are for guys on the next one. So if you want to flip over there.
Yeah. Oh. I scrolled on the StreamYard page, not the our tab, not the chart one. Oh.
So the first note that I had is on Kamara, who currently is the only guy above the 20 expected fantasy point per week threshold. So the only guy who, if we ended the season today, would be close to delivering a legendary season. However, I'm worried he's going to be coming back down to earth here pretty soon. You got the injuries to the Saints offensive line. You have Derek Carr out for a couple weeks and Spencer Rattler in. And then you have a pretty formidable run defense in the Broncos that they are going against here on Thursday night. So do you think this is the beginning of Kamara starting to trend down? Or will he just get such an absurd amount of volume that it doesn't matter?
I think it feels a little bit like we're right now we're looking at the Kamara from last year, where he actually does get a really high amount of volume. Like even last week, he had 21.7 expected points, and that equated to 17.4 points. So even though like efficiency there is horrific, you're still actually getting decent points. I think there probably is just inherent risks with somebody maintaining such a great volume in the face of inefficiency one way or another. But it's hard to see anybody coming to like unseat him. Like it's hard to envision them saying like, okay, time to sorry Kamara, it's Kendra time.
Well, Kendra is going to be active for Thursday, and I believe
I'm very excited about that.
Kendra not even on an injury report, which I should hope not. Taysom is a limited participant in their Tuesday walkthrough, and Taysom is really like he's closer to a running back than he ever has been before. So I think him and Kendra are the two largest threats to Kamara keeping this up. But yeah, I think the reality is
it's like a scam. It's a scam PPR back. Is what he is.
Yeah, I think the best way to put it is he's not in free fall, but he's probably not going to be living in this plus 20 expected fantasy points region of the chart forever.
Right. Like you can't project that for the rest of the way. Yeah, you're getting a small win where you drafted him in best ball.
I had a couple quick hitters here that I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on. One was just David Montgomery was going way too low in best ball drafts. Like the guy's role is not all that much different than Gibbs. They have different skill sets and they're utilized in different ways. But like the opportunities that he's getting compared to the opportunities Gibbs is getting, like they're similar. David Montgomery just has so much touchdown equity on the Lions. He's got a touchdown in 8 straight games with them. And this thing is the most baffling part to me. But man, the contingent upside stuff is properly priced on guys that like have no role themselves. Like for example, on like the Eli Mitchell types, or like if you go back in time to like how Alexander Mattison was priced when he was backing up Dalvin Cook, like we price those guys, I think, pretty reasonably, where they don't really have any standalone value, but they have this huge upside if the starter were to go down. Those guys, I think we price just fine. But guys like David Montgomery or Tyler Allgeier, like these guys who have this standalone role that is like not only just like David Montgomery's role isn't just usable, when Gibbs is healthy and fully active, like it's pretty good. And then if Gibbs goes down, we've seen what happens. David Montgomery becomes like probably the RB2 or RB3 for those weeks. Like the work is insane. And he's the type of back that can handle that. Like over a limited stretch.
It's the boring backs in the 1B role that we probably underprice. Like it's hard to envision David Montgomery upside. So there's nothing that gets priced in there when like the contingent upside is almost the equivalent of like a similar pair.
And I'm more just saying this to like self-flagellate a little bit, because this was a discussion that I had with a bunch of people during the offseason on why David Montgomery is too low, and I thought he should be going a lot higher. And I did not have strong enough conviction myself to get massively overweight on David Montgomery. I relied on, other people who I think are really good at evaluating players. And I saw the upside case for Gibbs too, which, I was happy to take Jahmyr Gibbs, but I think we want to be really careful about letting the upside case of one player blind us to the upside case of another. And it's just not a mistake I will be making again. Just want to remind myself to consider the full range of outcomes for every player, and not just, hide a portion of the range of outcomes because it inherently, means that you're getting a worse outcome for a player that other people like. So that just a note that I had here for David Montgomery. And then the other quick note that I had here was just on Jags backfield. We've got Travis Etienne here. He's barely cresting into the 10 expected fantasy point range here. And then we already talked about, the trouble that you're getting with D'Ernest Johnson working in and Tank Bigsby, not looking like he's ever going to have any kind of role in the passing game. I kind of think this Jags backfield might be entirely unusable this season. They might just be a team that's bad enough with enough mouths going there that it's just not no guy here is the answer.
I agree with you. I think we kind of like teased that was a strong possibility last week, and this week kind of just confirms it.
Yeah, the D'Ernest Johnson stuff. Man, I don't know if you remember this. It was a few, I think it was the Jags London game where it was after the Bigsby injury, where he like still saw special teams work, and I IKB'd a projection really hard and said D'Ernest Johnson was the running back too. Too bad I didn't do it on this game. Too bad. I was right on the read that it was not Tank's Bigsby backfield dominator. It was going to be a committee, but that's okay. Wrong slate to do it on. I did want to very briefly touch on Bijan Robinson before we move on, because we had that good question from Run Good Rick. He said Bijan's performance got there last week, but it felt underwhelming. And so you can see Bijan here. He's like dead center in the chart. He's right next to James Conner, right next to Najee Harris. The really unfortunate truth for Bijan so far this season is that he's not clearly the best runner in his backfield. And that's not to take anything away from Bijan. It's more to say that Tyler Allgeier's been good. And so it just makes it hard for Bijan to actually dominate the backfield and get this massive workload. And it's really frustrating when you have a guy as good as Tyler Allgeier, who he's going to take away touchdowns from Bijan. And he just, he's getting some passing game work. He's got, a little above 4 expected receiving fantasy points a game, but it's not enough with Allgeier butchering it or kind of cutting up the backfield and taking his share of it. So I don't know how I feel about Bijan. He's probably, like, if you look at him on in the dog bowl this week, he's probably a little overdrafted, right? Like he's going a bit high right now, and you know, same for BRs in general. Like here's an interesting one: Bijan Robinson or either of the Lions running backs this week.
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. I think I couldn't hear you for a minute, and I panicked a little.
Okay.
So, my thoughts on Bijan is that he actually did play quite well last week, but like you said, the Allgeier, we were told is the kind of this off season that, like, listen, our plan is to run the piss out of Bijan Robinson, but they're clearly splitting the carries. Actually, in week 6, Allgeier had more carries than Bijan, which that's a little surprising. Bijan had 18 routes to 4, so I think Bijan's workload is more like a 3rd round back or like a 4th round back than a 1st round back. You can still get some big upside games from his big spike games from his kind of his talent upside, but the usage is like, this is much worse usage than we're expecting or hoping for.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the tight end charts here. If we cook, we might be able to get out of here under 2 hours, Drico, which would be a personal record for us.
Yeah, that would be a record, and I feel like we can do it. Let's like, people listen to this podcast in 2x speed. Why don't we just talk in 2x speed, and so we get through this very quickly? And why don't you go ahead?
Okay, first, I think you need to reshare your screen because the tight end chart is not showing up. I think when you disconnected earlier, your screen share may have failed there, but we're going to continue talking in 2x speed just for the bit because it's much more fun to do it this way. Imagine the person who's hearing me talk at 4x speed. They must think that I took so much Adderall before the show. Now we're about to have the tight end charts up here, but I'm going to just absolutely keep the verbal diarrhea flowing again with the bit. Now we've got the tight end chart on the screen. I will go ahead and give it to you, Drico, to explain to the folks what they're seeing here.
So this is our tight end utilization and efficiency chart. On the bottom axis, you've got percentage of team dropbacks. The green bar, I'm actually going to have to slow down. The green bar corresponds to the percentage of their team dropbacks that they're running a route. And then the red bar, or is it a pink bar, is pass blocking. And so then you get the full picture of what percentage of team dropbacks are they on the field for. And then and we also give you that focus on when are they actually running a route. Then we also have ADOT and targets per run because we want receiving stats too, right? We don't want just like empty calorie routes.
Had a couple notes here on the chart, and the bit was very fun talking at 4x speed, but I'm just gonna focus on the analysis here. We'll get through it regardless. So the first one I have is this Colby Parkinson, 27% targets per route run. Guy's been having insane amount of targets the last 3 weeks. I'm here to call danger. Colby Parkinson is about to get cucked by Cooper Kupp if he comes back this week. So I would just say if you're like doing drafts, if you're doing BRs, Colby Parkinson looks like a really interesting scroll down tight end. I would just say be cognizant. Don't jam 1,000,000,000% Colby Parkinson right now before you find out what the status is of Cooper Kupp. You might find yourself sitting there with Colby Parkinson, with 12% targets per route run instead of the 27%. So just want to be very cautious there. Do you have anything to add on Colby Parkinson, or can I move on to the next guy?
Yeah, I think you can move on, and that was good analysis.
Here you go. This is a classic victory lap spot. So all off season, I was calling Dalton Kincaid fancy Evan Ingram, and I need to take an L on that because he is not fancy Evan Ingram. Dalton Kincaid is just a poor man's Evan Ingram. It's Evan Ingram comes back. First game he's healthy. Guy's just back on his bullshit. 31% targets per route run. Doesn't matter that we have Brian Thomas Jr., this incredible wide receiver on our team. Evan Ingram is a target magnet, baby. And he doesn't pass block at all. Evan Ingram, another guy that I was pretty high on, and then I got bullied out of this offseason because, there's really just, low ADOT, not super talented. You're just praying for another 140 target season. We're getting it, baby. We're getting another 100+ target season for Evan Ingram here. I think especially in this dysfunctional team, like the Evan Ingram safety blanket stuff, it hits just right for the Jags. So
yeah, that makes sense. That does make sense. I do think like some of the advanced stats for Kincaid are somewhat interesting. Like if you look at him on the full season, he's at 70% route run. He's got a 7.7 ADOT and a 23% targets per route run. Like that seems like fine. I think it's when you add in it's before you add in the context of the low volume of the offense. It means his price was too high this offseason. So like he's coming in under of what you hoped for, and then you layer it in, and he's been a bad pick. But I think he actually I think you're right in that like he comps pretty similarly, like stylistically, and you just have a much better environment for that type of player in the Jaguars than Kincaid, than the Bills.
Yeah, I mean this stat is doing a lot of work for me, but the Bills still have yet to attempt over 30 passes this season. They only were below 30 passes twice last year prior to the offensive coordinator change to Joe Brady, and they barely beat the Jets while throwing under 30 times yet again. Man, it's hard to put my finger on what is going wrong in Buffalo, but maybe if they looked at their pass rate, they might figure it out. They just might. But yeah,
maybe they should trade for a receiver.
Yeah, maybe. It's going to be so hilarious when Amari Cooper goes out there and the Bills still only throw it 26 times in a game. But in all seriousness, Dalton Kincaid,
because that is their plan. You need a coaching change, or like a priority change.
Yeah, I think you just need to clean house. The entire Bills organization need new front office, new head coach, new offensive coordinator. I think the Bills are wasting Josh Allen. I think as an organization they got bailed out by getting one of the best values in the draft that you have seen in the last couple decades in Josh Allen. And then now they're just wasting it. So, but in all seriousness, a little bit of Kincaid analysis. The role is great. The talent for the player, I'm like not totally sold on, but I think you can confidently say
I don't even think the role is great. I think the role is like fine.
Well, the role is great. It's just the volume, the offensive volume. Like pretend that you could transpose this role into a higher pass volume offense, like all of a sudden we're pretty excited, right?
Yeah, I mean, just like if I'm if he had an 80% or above route run, I would agree with you. Maybe I'm nitpicking. I am nitpicking here. At only 70% on the full year, like this targets per run in low 20s is like it's too low to be great. It's good. It's fine. But you're right. The bigger issue is the drop back count. If you had a lot more pass attempts here, you'd be feeling a lot better about.
Like imagine Kincaid on the Seahawks where they're just out there chucking it. Like
right.
All of a sudden,
you'd love that.
yeah, the 70% routes, you're like, don't care. They're throwing 45 times a game. Like, he's going to get 10 targets. It's fine.
Right. You'd be saying the same thing about that you are about Evan Ingram.
Right. Okay, couple more tight ends. We'll try and go quick. All right, Juwan Johnson. The Juwan Johnson ascension is here. I know the targets per route run and ADOT don't look impressive. I just need you to ignore the previous results that we've gotten, and I need you to focus on the snap count trend. His snaps have been increasing week over week, and you just get the ultimate, the perfect storm for Juwan Johnson, who is a converted receiver to tight end. He's more receiver than tight end. You see he's one of the guys that pass blocks at a much lower rate than some of the guys like, Kate Otten or George Kittle, Colby Parkinson, Dalton Schultz, those guys. He's not out there primarily for pass blocking. He's more out there to be running routes. The number of routes he's running are increasing week over week. And now you have Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed missing time. I mean, I just think this sets up Juwan Johnson is about to feast for however long the Saints are without their top two pass catchers.
I think I think that's right. I mean, you have to be concerned that even with those guys out, his targets per out run was still weak, and has been kind of weak for his career. I think that has to be a concern in the back of your mind. But as a way to play those injuries, Juwan Johnson is a pretty good way to do it. Like, especially if you're talking about underdog, where it's half PPR, and like most people, you're kind of having to punt tight end anyway. People like kind of consolidate on their favorites, and if you can get him under-owned, like that can be pretty attractive. But I still think you have to kind of call out that he's been a weak target earner his entire career. He was a weak target earner even last week. You still have that kind of risk factor there. Yeah,
well said. I think that's the necessary cold water for the Juwan Johnson breakout. Okay, last tight end, or no, we've got two more here. One more on this chart. Aren't you worried about Sam Laporta, Drico?
Yeah. I think in week 6 you have to be. It was a little easier to be not impacted, but another week where his routes run just 74%, and that's 74% for the full season. Last week he was at 59%, and then just a 5% targets per run. That's honestly highly concerning.
Last week, part of it is just they could do whatever they wanted. Last week was a playground for them, right? They were just shit out of the Cowboys. But it's not like that was an outlier for Sam Laporta. Like he wasn't getting targets before that. So
right, and it's not just so 74%, and I think if you're projecting it the rest of the way, you'd probably do bump that up to 80% when you account for the injuries he's had. But 11% targets per route run, like that, and just 6.1 ADOT, like that is like highly concerning.
Yeah, and we talked about this on a previous show, but I really do think a big part of it is the emergence of Jameson Williams, and that is just eating into the pie of this offense. And so, all right, let's move to the backup tight end chart. There's just one other guy we've got to shout out here. He's at the very top of the chart. It's David Njoku, comically low 2.2 ADOT, 20% targets per route run. Amari Cooper has left, so there's a bunch of vacated targets there. I mean, the 2.2 ADOT is almost like there's very few circumstances where I'd say, oh yeah, that's actually a good thing. But in this circumstance where his quarterback can't complete a pass more than 5 yards down the field, 2.2 ADOT means that you can at least count on the targets David Njoku is receiving to be catchable balls. Otherwise, they're just, they're entirely unuseful. So David Njoku seems like he is due for a little bump here. I expect him to be the primary pass catcher for this offense here without Amari Cooper. If there's a quarterback change, that could certainly shake things up, but the Browns have not signaled anything that makes us think that they'll be changing quarterbacks, even though they should.
Right. If anything, the opposite. And yeah, a changing quarterback would actually probably be helpful because then the quality of targets, even if the quantity of targets went down, the quality would go up. But totally makes sense where it's a garbage offense, and now targets just have to be funneled through this guy, and he's just going to be spammed. Like, you have to worry about kind of the re-injury risk, but he does look pretty interesting as a week-to-week play.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to receiver here. Oh, I'll give a quick shout to Ja'Tavion Sanders. We talked about him on the last show. He turned in a pretty good day, earned a lot of targets, ran a lot of routes. He's definitely an interesting player. Liked him as a prospect. Managed to earn volume with good target competition and good, NFL caliber players around him in college. So he's one to leave a light on for. Ja'Tavion Sanders, kind of interesting. It remains to be seen if he could actually usurp Tommy Tremble when Tremble is healthy. But he certainly, I think last week was the first step he would need to take to earning that role. I think it's still an uphill battle for him, as a rookie to be the tight end one on the team. But last week was the first thing you would see if it was a guy coming for that job. So.
Yeah, makes sense for sure. Where you had let me see, 73% route run last week, 24% targets per route run. So that's pretty positive, And then so returning to the receiver chart, we have just beside new AJ Brown, we have old AJ Brown. No surprise.
Yeah, Malik Neighbors, a new challenger approaches Malik Neighbors in the top right corner of the weighted targets per route run and fantasy points per game chart. So this is a fun one. They play each other this week. I think it's pretty interesting. I don't think there's anything more to say other than AJ Brown is a very good receiver. Now, this is on a much smaller sample than Malik Neighbors because he missed a bunch of time. That being said, if all you do is go out there and score fantasy points and earn targets the games that you play, I don't think we can say anything negative about AJ Brown. He definitely, I'm entirely unsurprised to see him in this top right quadrant. A guy that I liked a lot here for a potential regression spot is DK Metcalf. Getting a ton of targets. You can see on the chart for guys that have as high a weighted targets per route run as he does, he's got one of the lowest fantasy points per game out of all of them. I think this is a pretty interesting regression spot for him here. He hit the Falcons. What are your thoughts here on Metcalf in this matchup?
So, who do they play? Who do the Seahawks play again? I should definitely know. They play the Falcons. Metcalf. Metcalf is always going to be interesting in a GPP, just because he's always going to be that he always has been that kind of profile of player where he gets targets deep down the field. He has the high ADOT, and then let me have a look here on his touchdown stuff. So on the year, so he's kind of running neutral on touchdowns, touchdown efficiency, which is kind of interesting because if we look at this chart here, he's at like the 15 fantasy points per game. Hasn't done anything crazy on the touchdown front. Yeah, I am. I guess I don't have anything special to say about him other than like he's always an interesting GPP play. Like I don't. Sorry, I don't have more to
Nope,
add
no,
there.
that's okay. The other guy I liked, and we talked about this matchup earlier for the 49ers and the Chiefs, but Brandon Ayuk also looking like a pretty good regression candidate here. Has only had the one big game early in the season. I mean, even this last week, he just wasn't getting very many targets. Um, the earlier weeks, I think you could attribute that to him missing training camp, kind of having a slow start there. This last week, I mean, you're still seeing Jawan Jennings out there, like earning volume too. So it's a little troubling. It's taking an already spread out offense and spreading it out even more in the passing game. I guess really what you're doing is you're taking the Christian McCaffrey receiving game that the other running backs aren't providing, and it's just going to the receivers now. But we would have hoped that would consolidate on Kittle and Debo and Ayuk, but instead it's just going to Jennings, and so that's been a little bit tricky. But I do kind of think Ayuk is in an interesting spot here. I think that if this game goes off, I just kind of it feels like an Ayuk spot to me with the matchup.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if I look on Ayuk, he's actually 2 touchdowns under expected on the year. So you pair. I guess that goes along with the passing offense in general being under expected on touchdowns. But yeah, he certainly strikes me as a fine regression candidate.
I saw him go at pick 57 in a dog bowl this week. Yeah,
That was probably the kind of low watermark. But still, player of his caliber in I mean, definitely a game that could any of these games could go out, but definitely a high powered offense.
yeah,
That could easily pay off like very decisively in your favor.
yeah. Seems pretty absurd for him to go that late. Um, let's see. The other guy I had notes on. Okay, so Drake London. I think it might have been a couple weeks ago where I said something to the effect of Drake London and Darnell Mooney were too close to each other on the chart for me to really consider Drake London as like a substantial difference to Darnell Mooney. And now I need to retract that statement because Drake London is separating as the most talented receiver on the team. Definitely more fun for it to be that way. Like I don't think anyone really enjoyed the Darnell Mooney, Ray McLeod stuff that we are getting. It's really fun when Drake London is dominating the targets like this. He looks like he is. I mean, from these last couple weeks, Drake London looks like he is on pace to comfortably pay off his tag of where he was going in best ball drafts when I think earlier in the season people were pretty worried about him. What do you think, Drico?
So looking at the stats, you get a pretty healthy 26% targets per out run on Drake London on the year, and then when you equate that to what I've got is a ADOT here. You combine that with a 2.1 yards per out run and 9.8 ADOT. Like the ADOT is a little bit low, but 26% targets per out run, pretty healthy there. And you have him in the you still have him in the hot, like even with the kind of more moderate ADOT, you still you still have him in the pretty healthy way to targets per out run. That, I mean, that he seems pretty good. Seems pretty good. Like you're definitely getting a really strong season from Drake London here. You have to be happy with what you're getting here. I know there was, like you said last week, there was some concern over whether he really was like one of the best receivers in the NFL, but I think that's starting to play out. I guess the one thing I'd note, so Darnell Mooney still at 20% targets per run, So, like, you're still getting a good... That's still a good stat for Darnell Mooney, and would prefer to look at it over, like, that kind of, like, longer time horizon. And I know this chart is too. But it's good to see that it's not like a 1A, 1B thing here, that they are starting to separate.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, those are all my notes for this chart. We can go ahead and move on to the next one.
And so these are the guys where they're 70 to 85% rate share.
This one, the first guy that sticks out to me is Josh Downs, who looks like he's the wide receiver one on the Colts. By my assessment, he looks like the better player on the field. I know Pittman's dealing with the back injury, and also the offense just looks so different under Joe Flacco than what it's going to look like with Anthony Richardson. But Josh Downs just looks like the better receiver. And I know that all offseason, that was something Pat was really pounding the table for. Whenever we had our rankings calls, Pat was not shy about telling us that even though we had Michael Pittman, ranked almost 2 rounds past the ADP, Pat thought he should be even later because he didn't see much of a talent difference between him and Josh Downs, and that's looking like it's coming to fruition here. So Josh Downs is a really interesting player, though, because I don't know how useful he's going to be with Richardson as the quarterback. Now, Downs and Richardson did have a pretty good connection, but we haven't gotten to see them play together for very many games. So it's interesting to me. I'm curious, though, what do you think on Downs, Drico? Is he someone where we should expect this production to decrease with Richardson taking back over?
Yeah, so with Richardson taking over, you get less pass attempts per dropback. So even with dropbacks staying the same, there's going to be less pass attempts. You get a lower completion percentage. You do get deeper passes. And I suppose that is the concern with Josh Downs. He's this kind of smaller slot receiver type that does mesh really well with Flacco. Much better than Anthony Richardson. But, maybe somebody like Josh Downs is kind of like suitable to Anthony Richardson too, where he can kind of get like a reliable receiver that he knows is going to be open short. And so maybe it's not as efficient as Flacco, but he's clearly a very good player. He's a very strong real life reality player, and his team has to find a way to use that. So I don't think it's going to crater or anything like that. But I do agree with you that with Richardson back, that does become a concern.
Yeah, the one guy I want to point out. So Josh Downs played in college with Drake May as his quarterback, and Drake May has gushed about how fantastic Josh Downs was. He was his favorite target in college. The guy who is now catching passes for Drake May and operating in that same way that Josh Downs did is Demario Douglas, who has a really good game, puts together a really good run after the catch where May hits him in stride across the middle of the field in the splash zone. Like, beautifully executed play by both May and Douglas. And it looks like Douglas might be the one to come out of this with the largest boost, the most to gain from the quarterback switch for the Patriots. So I think this is a kind of interesting question. Josh Downs versus Demario Douglas, who we can just call Drake May's new Josh Downs.
Oh, my God.
Who do you like better rest of season? Do you like real Josh Downs or do you like new Josh Downs?
It has to be Demario Douglas when you factor in if with the same quarterback you have to prefer Josh Downs, but Drake May, like Anthony Richardson is such a negative to have at quarterback, like he is such a negative point to your fantasy production that you have to prefer the guy playing with Drake May. Like I don't see how you can think about it any other way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Okay, one other guy I had on this chart that I thought was pretty interesting for this week is Jordan Addison. I mean, he missed the early parts of the season with an injury, but you get him off the bye here. I think it's safe to assume he's fully healthy now. I mean, this kind of feels like a pretty fun spot for Addison. I haven't looked at the game total yet. I would assume this is one of the higher totals. This just seems like a really good spot for Addison. And he's coming in a part of the chart.
God damn it.
Well, long and short of it, I like the spot for Addison. He's in a really favorable part of the chart. He's got lots of good company around him. Guys like Deontay Johnson, Brian Thomas Jr., Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb. So I think this is a pretty good spot for Addison. I'll go ahead and move on to the next guy. I don't know if you can hear me now. Jalen Polk was another one I had a note on here. I'm slightly concerned he's dead because he's looked pretty bad in all the advanced metrics. He's had a lot of drop issues too, which that's not great. I was going to ask you if you think that Polk is dead and buried, or if we need to give it more time with May. I know you're having some technical difficulties here. My read on the situation is it's not looking great for Jalen Polk. If I were adjusting my prior, I'm definitely adjusting it down. But I do think that it's probably something where we don't want to be too hasty to just bury this rookie wide receiver who's supposed to be pretty talented, played with two other NFL caliber receivers.
I'm back.
Okay. But yeah, Jalen Polk, is he dead and buried, or do we need to give it more time with May?
Is Jalen Polk dead and buried? So let me look at the Patriots snap stuff from last week. So Jalen Polk down to a 69% route share last week. So that to me would suggest and that's down from 97% the week before, 87% the week before that. That would kind of suggest to me, so at 70%, even though the coach is kind of burying him, that would kind of suggest that the team still sees him as important. He's going to play, but he has to play better. I like with a rookie, you don't want to bury them straight away because they have lots of time to kind of figure it out. But I think the leash has to be pretty short. If you're seeing Drake May come in and kind of like elevate the offense, other guys are getting there, and then Polk is still in the cold, then you've no excuses left.
Yeah. I think I'm probably again, like you said, you don't want to bury him too fast, but after this Jags game where they get a really good matchup, I sure hope to see something from him. Otherwise, my Polk best ball bags will be very sad.
We'll be sad if it doesn't get there. But that's the risk you run with rookies, right?
Yes. The charts are not up on the screen, by the way. When you came back in, I think they came down. If you're able to share those.
Okay.
For our last one. There's one guy I had on this one, and then we can go to the final chart. George Pickens sitting here with an absurd weighted targets per route run. Granted, it is in a very low volume offense, which we talked about this with in the context of the Bills and why Dalton Kincaid, although his role in other offenses would probably be pretty favorable, in a really low pass volume offense, it's just not enough. George Pickens, kind of in a similar situation. The The difference between Pickens and Kincaid in my mind, though, is that I think George Pickens is a really talented player. I think Kincaid is probably like better than bad, but not great. I think Pickens could like legitimately be great in the right circumstances. I just don't know. Like, for me, I struggle with guys like this because it's like, man, he can very clearly with this opportunity, like if they just get into a game where they're trailing and the game just plays out right, like he has absolutely nuclear weeks in his range, right? But most of the weeks, you're just probably, like that's a quick way to sink an otherwise good lineup if you're playing George Pickens. So is this the kind of guy where should we just be playing George Pickens every week? Like, do we pay the George Pickens tax for when it eventually gets there? What do you think?
So a lot of this usage stuff doesn't seem too bad. It definitely seems more encouraging than Kincaid. So you do get 33 dropbacks for the team last week, and you're on an average of 32.7 for the year. There was a lot of noise about his route share in week 5. Or snap share. I think his snap share was something like in the high 50s. His route share was 65%. If you look at the route share for the full year, and I think that's how we kind of show him in this range, he's at 81%. And then his targets per run is in the high 20s. So I think that's pretty good underlying metrics, and a lot of that kind of suggests like a very good player, which is kind of what you're saying. And you've definitely gotten some, like the other piece of it is that his air yards. So he had 120 air yards in week 6, 152 in week 4. So like there's definitely games there where the air yards is enough to produce like a strong fantasy performance. You are going to get a lot of volatility here, though, because of the nature of the offense. I don't know if I'm going to pay a tax for this, but this seems like this upside seems very tangible. Like, whereas Kincaid, like the Kincaid upside is a prayer, whereas this is true real upside. It's going to be volatile week to week. Is how I read it.
Yeah, I think that is perfectly put. I couldn't said it better. All right, let's hit the last chart, and we're gonna get to talk about your favorite player here, Drico, and that is Troy Franklin. So Troy Franklin kind of popping in his weighted targets per route run. Is that Troy Franklin's music? I hear.
I think we're getting Troy Franklin music. I don't know if I remembered to say this in the last show. I kind of said it in the Discord. But his even on the low route stuff, his underlying usage has actually been pretty good. The only thing, so so I've got good news and bad news about week 6. So good news about week 6 is that he was up to a 68% route share. Bad news is that came with a drop off to 11% target per run. In prior weeks, he'd been at 42, 44, 29%. And so it is a bit more concerning to see the per route efficiency stuff fall. Like, obviously it's not going to be at 42, 44%. But it's a little bit concerning to see it drop off to 11%. But I think what we've got here is we've got Troy Franklin, a starting wide receiver for the Broncos, who's played after getting like fucking dog walked all offseason. He's played himself into a role now. His ADOT is strong. He's getting targets deep down the field. So I think that this makes for a pretty worthwhile bench stash. Pretty strong bench stash, actually.
Yeah, you talked about the good news and bad news. I hate to do this to you because I also really like Troy Franklin and want him to be a thing. but I think there's worse news. And the worst news is you can track why the target share went down so much, or the targets per route run, went down so much. And it's because Devon Vele was active for the first time since week 1. And Devon Vele, target dominator for the Denver Broncos, is out here eating Troy Franklin's lunch. Just like in training camp, Devon Vele is out here just mossing dudes. In all seriousness, I do think that if you made me rank the Broncos receivers who would be the most fantasy relevant for the rest of the season, it's obviously Courtland Sutton number 1. It's probably Devon Vele number 2. And then it's Troy Franklin number 3. And then, I mean, Marvin Mims is just keeping the ship-chasing curse alive and well, because Marvin Mims is, like, never heard of him. You know, who?
Right. A bit role player in the offense.
If you want to talk about the ship-chasing curse, though, there is one force in the world that is stronger than the ship-chasing curse, and it is the Dr. Jesse Morse reverse mush of Christian Watson. In case you did not follow this on Twitter, Dr. Jesse Morse came out and said something where he had diagnosed Christian Watson with a high ankle sprain simply from watching the video. And Christian Watson's dad replied and let him know that actually you're incorrect. The doctors who have diagnosed Christian Watson and taken MRIs on his ankle and examined him have said, no, it's not a high ankle sprain, and he'll likely be back soon. To which Dr. Jesse Morse argued with Christian Watson's dad over the diagnosis of the injury. Great bit. Absolutely fantastic. Of course, Christian Watson comes back, puts up a touchdown in his first game back. I mean, I think this is a interesting interesting spot for Christian Watson. You got the Dobbs injury, you got the Wicks injury. Jaden Reed also injured. The Jaden Reed stuff is really interesting because he's a guy who he's played through a lot of injury last year. Like, they basically couldn't keep him off the field. If he was at all capable of playing, he would play. But what they do when he would play is it really was much more of a decoy role. Like, his usage was much lower, like substantially lower in the games when he was dealing with those injuries. He'd also, he'd get fewer routes, etc. So I think it's something to watch this week. I mean, if you want me to kind of like pull my crystal ball out here, I think what we're very likely to see is Jaden Reed plays. He's much less involved than he would be if he were healthy. And I think you see a lot more of it go through, Christian Watson, Tucker Kraft, Romeo Dobbs. I think all of those guys get a pretty good bump this week. And Christian Watson's the one I'm pretty interested in.
That makes sense. I just want to I know I'm going back in time here. So Troy Franklin had 11% targets per route run. Vele only had a 17%. So it wasn't dramatically off.
He did run more routes though and get more raw targets. But yes, they're not in the targets per route run. They're not worlds apart. I mean,
you're talking about the difference between 68% route share and a 71%. Like, I think that's pretty close. Okay,
I thought it was farther apart than that. So I'm happy to be wrong there. I would love to see Troy Franklin become a thing. It would be very good for me.
Right. I think you've got a good chance that he will. Like, I think that makes Vele a good bench stash too, but I think they're both intriguing.
Yeah, I don't have a note on this guy, but before we wrap up, we probably should shout out Bub Means here. Let me just hit all. I'm gonna hit all the Saints stuff. Bub Means, Mason Tipton, probably the two receivers that I'd be most interested in here as the Saints deal with the Olave and Shaheed injuries. So yeah, Means, Tipton, Jawan Johnson. I think all three of those guys are the ones that received the largest bump from the injuries. Would not be surprised at all if Taysom Taysom Hill is active. To see him be a pretty big participant in the offense as well, just as they try and find guys that they can give touches to.
Yeah, makes sense for sure.
Was there anyone else on this chart that you wanted to shout out, or should we wrap it up here?
We should probably touch. Maybe we've touched on him enough. Almost every show, but Leggett continues to be interesting. He's up. He's up to an 80% targets per run now. So I know there's some injuries in that offense. But he's played himself into a role. He's in the on the full year, and the weighted targets per run, he's in the 50% range. So that seems pretty encouraging for a rookie. That definitely feels like there's a breakout story there.
Would have loved if that breakout story happened last week, because that would have been a dog bowl seat for me. Just a couple points short there with Xavier Leggett in my best lineup, but that's okay. Don't print in the newspaper that I'm mad.
Yeah, but have you considered that he has a 19% target per run on the year? You should actually be happy.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy. My Sklansky Bucks are, I'm rolling in the Sklanskys right now. But with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. If you made it to the end, we appreciate you. Hope that you took something away from this show. Good luck in this week. And we did not hit our goal of under 2 hours, but we were directionally accurate.
Yeah, we're directionally accurate. We got Skolansky Bucks in under 2 hours, because I think this is the shortest show all season.
Yep. All right. Well, we will see you all next week. Have a good one, everybody.
See you next week, everyone.